Here's my old Atomic Purple controller that I've been using for over 15 years, almost 20 years. And since I was a kid, I've only had 2 controllers. A few years ago, I actually found a really good deal on a controller at a pawn shop. It was only a couple bucks, and the analog stick was perfect. Now, you know, I've gone all that time with only 3 controllers, and I thought, you know, maybe it's time to get a 4th one. So I bought one of those variety pack kind of things at GameStop, and you don't know what color you're going to get, you don't know what quality you're going to get either. So I got it thinking, oh, maybe I'll get a blue one or a red one or something. Nope, got another Atomic Purple. To differentiate the two, I thought it'd be kind of fun to paint this one. So we're going to crack it open, and instead of paint it from the outside, which could chip and look kind of shabby, I thought maybe we could paint it white on the inside so that the purple would shine through, but then we'd also get a little bit of the white. I don't know how it's going to look, so we're going to find out. By the way, if you are thinking about buying one of those GameStop controllers that they don't tell you what color it is, they're real cheap. I got mine for $13.99 plus like $5 or $6 of shipping. The control stick, we just tried it out. We played some Mario Kart just to test it out. The control stick feels like a 15-year-old controller stick, and while you have it cracked open, maybe change out the control stick, and fairly easy to swap out if you know how. So we're going to take this thing apart. Alright, so we took it apart. There are 7 main screws, but then there's 2 that you might forget that are actually a slightly smaller one that fit where the memory pack goes. Make sure that your sticks and your triggers don't fall out. I keep a magnetic holder for my screws while it's open. You might as well get a couple Q-tips, alcohol wipe kind of thing, and just give it a once over on the inside. So to paint this, we're going to have to remove the Z trigger and remove basically all of the innards. The old Super Nintendo ones were actually a metal pin that held the shoulder buttons in. But for this one, it looks like there's going to be 1, 2, 3 to get the analog stick out, and not a whole lot holding up the card. In fact, it wants to come out now. It's really just held in by the sheer willpower of these shoulder button sensors and things. So we'll take this apart, we'll take these screws out. Okay, so we've got this taken apart, and I'm going to keep these 2 connected as well as we can. Now, if you are actually replacing the analog stick, you know, take that apart as you need. Maybe I'll change this out some other time. For now, all I needed to do was separate that out, so I'm going to leave that off to the side, mostly intact. And the buttons aren't screwed in by anything, they're really just held in on these plastic rods here. This gets really gummy. I can even feel there's almost like a powder of the dust that's left over. Let's take the D-pad out. The D-pad, it does actually matter what direction you put it in. There are little notches to remind you what direction they go in, and there's a little notch here that it lines up with. It's always good, you know, to give it a little once over, and I'll do that during the time lapse, so you'll see just a little Q-tip, get it wet with some alcohol, and I'll actually do that to the innards here too, so that the paint has something really good to stick onto. By the way, speaking of the paint, I'm going to be using some KILZ Complete. It's an oil-based. It's basically a primer. I mean, it'll show through the purple because I'll be taping it off really nicely. The other funny thing about it is the C buttons. You would think because there are different C buttons and they all have to face different directions, what if you get them mixed up? You won't get them mixed up because the way they have them configured here is almost like a little password for each one. So they're all different. They're exactly different from each other as to make sure that if you do take yours apart, there is not any way to accidentally put them in the wrong order, thank goodness. When I put the puzzle back together, which order they go in. Yeah, that'll be nice to get a Q-tip with some alcohol on that. Cool. So now let's clean these. Oh, the Z trigger too. And the Z trigger pops way down like this and then snaps from above so it doesn't accidentally come out while you're playing. I'm going to leave this trigger in. That'll get taped off anyway. Alright, so let's clean this and get it taped up. so I just got done wiping down the inside and some of the outside, frankly. Loving this color because I grew up playing with this one. I just got another one at GameStop, and I didn't get to pick the color. And we just got done cleaning it, and now as we let the alcohol fully evaporate, fully dry, we're going to set that aside, and I'm going to give each of these pieces, you can see the D-pad has quite a bit of dust on them on the inside. I'll give these a once over, and we'll be back with you. So we've given everything the once over, and man, did these buttons need it. Every single one of these buttons, especially the A button and especially the B button, had a lot of grime, a lot of gross stuff on it. And over time it builds up, and then you push down a button and it kind of takes its time getting back up again, and it did a great job swiping that off. Now the buttons are going to be a little more responsive too. Oh, I guess I'll talk about this too. I cleaned the cable, and I considered, should I paint the inside of the barrel of the port? And really the answer will be no, and the reason is this is a solid piece. It's not two pieces clamshelled together. The way to get this off is to release it from the male end of the port, slide it all the way down, and then unhook it from the actual basin where it connects in. And I'm not going to do that. So this part's still going to be purple, and that's fine. This will be atomic purple plastic with white on the inside. So now we're at the point where we are going to mask off all of these inside edges, but anything that will be an outside edge, outside of the controller, including the outside of the barrels for the buttons, anywhere that we don't want paint to hit. So we're just going to hit a piece of tape on the outside here so that paint will hit the inside, but not this outside edge. For the detail work, I figured I'd use electrical tape. To be honest, I looked everywhere. I could not find my painter's tape, so we are just going to use electrical tape and then mask it. So that took a lot longer than I thought, but every part of this is taped off that should be sprayed. I even covered up each of the screw holes just in case. So on the outside end where no paint is going to go, it is completely airtight. I'm going to do the other end. I think this one will take less time. It's a little less intricate. Just going around the outside edge, and I really could just cover this part of it with electrical tape. The challenging part is going to be getting into each of these holes, but on the negative side, on the inside, when the buttons go back in, that part won't have paint and it won't rub. So I just went through all kinds of electrical tape, probably about a quarter of a roll there. I've got the whole thing masked off. I figured because this one is so thin that I could just mask the top, same with the D-pad. But these ones, you saw at the beginning of this time lapse that the barrels of the buttons kind of needed to be held in so that we didn't get paint in there. Just very carefully lining the inside. The front panel was actually easier to line than the back panel. I think now at this point we are ready to start painting. I want to put an even coat, you know, even in the little nooks and crannies. In fact, especially in the nooks and crannies, so it's not forgotten. I'm going to just clean up a few things here and there just to make sure that it is perfectly ready, almost like a stencil. And now it is a matter of sticking the paint on. These are in no way fully dry, but I just couldn't resist. You want to take all the electrical tape off while it's still tacky. I think if I left it on too long, then when I pulled the electrical tape off, some of the paint would come off with it. I'm excited to see what it looks like. I brought them inside after only about an hour of drying. You know, I just got to leave it for a couple hours. I'm to the stage where it is just sort of tacky and it feels a little sticky. I'd like it to fully dry. But before it fully dries, I want to take off the electrical tape. Having taken off the tape, here is the finished product. Really cool color. It looks like that purple controller you know and love with like a cream undertone. It's really cool looking. Let me show you the front plate. Now what I've done is I went in the garage and I found my old denatured alcohol, the mineral spirits, and I'll go through and I'll get rid of these extra little pieces that either my fingers left behind or the tape left behind, so that we can just have clean buttonholes, because right now they are kind of gummy. Granted, the tape is, or the paint is still tacky. I think once I clean this stuff up, it's gonna look really slick. It does still have that purple, that atomic purple finish to it, but in the right light you can really tell that it's white underneath. It's real cool. So I'm going to clean that up. Tape is all sticky and gross, and then I'm going to grab a bunch of Q-tips, my mineral spirits, which I will not drop, and try to limit how much I get it onto my hands, and we'll clean it up and let it fully dry and cure overnight. The paint was really tacky. It is now fully dry to the touch. It also really helped to clean this thing up. This side turned out great, and I think the masking worked really well. I do actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I recommend using the electrical tape. You know, it's smaller, it's thinner. The other thing I found is if you miss a spot, you know, if paint accidentally does get back in there, you saw when it first came out, there was a lot of white over here. Just get it with some paint thinner and it comes right off. Okay, so I'm going to put this thing back together. Here it is. Pretty awesome. I'm liking the way it turned out. I'm liking the way that the purple shows through. It even shows kind of the plastic reinforcement lines all across. It has kind of a robotic feel to it. The one thing that is just still kind of bugging me is how loose the stick is. That's not any fault of mine. That's just the way it came when I bought it from GameStop. You get what you pay for, I guess. I wouldn't mind replacing it myself. All four of my controllers, two of them are really good. and then actually both the atomic purples are kind of hurting on the analog stick. So this is the original atomic purple. This is the new one. Check it out up close. Super cool. Now that we've done the work that we did, it really shows all of these lines, all of these connector points where the sockets go for the screws. I'm super impressed with the way it turned out. Looking at it on the back. My only complaint is I missed a spot, like right here on the back of the Z trigger, and that's just probably the way I was masking. And if I really wanted to, I could go back and mask it all off and spray it again, or I could just dab it with a little bit of white paint and it would go just perfectly. Other than that, I'm super satisfied with the way it turned out. I love all these ridges and dots and things. You're not going to see that part anyway, so I might not even worry about it. I showed it to somebody and she said it looked like a grape haichu. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of accurate to the color. I don't know if you have a name, a suggestion for a name for this new kind of creamy purple controller. I would love to hear it. The next thing I'm going to do to this, I'll make a video about replacing or repairing the bowl. I've been looking at a couple of videos on how you do that, either with epoxy. Some of them looked a little more rinky-dink than others, the methods to fix the bowl and the analog stick. But really, I'd love to kind of tighten up these analog sticks. They work great, but there's a little too much give. For our next video, I will want to clean up the bowl of the analog stick and see if I can fix that.